tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So we are talking about the beautiful list known as the 10 fetters, the Sangyojana, by request. Thank you for requesting the fetters. And we've talked through the first 4. So the brief review is that this is a list of 10 qualities in the heart, but also in a way stages in spiritual practice that are released or uprooted gradually as we grow in wisdom. The traditional stages through which we pass are known as the 4 paths sometimes. This is entering the stream, returning once, not returning, and arahantship. So with entering the stream, this is the first opening to the truth of how things are and what we are. And it includes uprooting the core fetters or obstructions in the heart of personality view, thinking that we are a permanent, solid, individual, separate entity, rather than a process interdependent and interwoven with everything. And then in connection with that, uprooting the hindrance of doubt in the path particularly, and uprooting the idea that anything other than investigation and insight and seeing clearly can liberate. Particularly the idea that one could be liberated through magic or ritual rather than through seeing clearly. So those 3 are uprooted with stream entry, and the traditional guarantee is 7 more lifetimes at the most until full liberation. So you're over the hump and you're on the downward slope, and now it's just, you still have to practice. It's not a steep downward slope. You could totally stall out, spend most of those 7 lifetimes, scrolling Netflix, I suppose, and then wake up right at the end and be like, oh my God, what am I doing? And then be done. But 7 lifetimes of that, it's not that long. You could do it. And it's better to be even shorter. Why suffer for even 7 more lifetimes when you could uproot suffering and just be happy? That's kind of the idea. So just do that, right? So the second stage is once returning. This is someone who has weakened but not uprooted the next 2 of the fetters, which are also the first 2 hindrances. So sensual desire, which we talked about last week, and ill will or hatred, which we'll talk about tonight. So with once return, you weaken these 2 fetters. They are only fully uprooted with the next stage, non-return, right? Because if you're going to return to embodied life, you do so because you want something, right? Or fear something. And so naturally those 2 fetters then are still here with you in some degree, right? Even if all you wanted, like every once in a while I'll complain to myself, I'll say, my life is so complicated and busy and I don't like earning money and having to do things. But it's too late for me to become a monk again in this lifetime. I want to be here with my family. So I'll be a monk in my next lifetime. I'll be super disenchanted with everything. By the time I'm like 25, I'm going to give myself a few years to screw around. And by the time I'm 25, I'll be like, okay, I'm done. And then I'll go off and ordain. So if I persist in having that fantasy about my next life, that kind of desire, I'm not yet a non-returner for sure, right? I might have to return at least once more. Who knows how long I'll persist in that, grasping fantasy of getting it right next time. Next time I'll get it right, whatever that means, So as long as you have a desire to still do something here, you're not yet a non-returner. Once that desire slips away and the only desire left is a desire to be to experience the deep, subtle states of meditation, you could be born, you're called a non-returner. You're not born back into the human and animal realm, or even the kind of embodied spirit realm. Embodied is not the right word, like the more gross level spirit realms, but you're born into realms of just pure meditative bliss, essentially. Not much happens there, but it's very nice, so they tell me. And then you become fully liberated just from there. And so the last 5 fetters, we'll get to them next week and through the month, are all eliminated only with arahantship, the last stage, full liberation. So it's kind of an uneven list. You uproot 3 things at first, then you weaken 2, then you uproot those 2, and then all 5 go when you take that last step. So tonight we are at Fetter 5, hatred, ill will. The Pali is vyāpāda. And so this is the second of those foundational hindrances that gets weakened with once return. So if you let go of the idea of the lifetimes and the stages, as a kind of metaphor, essentially we're talking about how the heart matures, right? So the first thing that happens is you see through the fixated self and some of the kind of narrative sort of illusions and assumptions and doubts and ideas that could accrete around that fixated self. And then it's like the heart is clear enough. It's almost like the personality, the self, the me, it veils everything else. So you have to cut through that first. That's this first thing that breaks open. And then here you are, you're practicing. It's like, okay, I've seen through the idea that I'm this person in this big, fixated way. Now what? I still have 7 lifetimes maybe to practice. What should I do? And what you do then is you just keep practicing. But what you can see once there's been an opening, and even a gentle opening, seeing through your own narrative of yourself, the me story, can bring you into contact with these next layers of your being. And what we start to see there are these visceral impulses, right? And 2 of the most core visceral impulses are this primal attraction and aversion impulse. Some things in our sensory world we want to get close to. People we like, food we like, shelter we like, feelings of safety we like, politics we like, communities we like. All this stuff in the world, the sense that I could be safe somewhere. All of these things pull our attention. And what we want from them is sensual in a way, right? The thing I want from the feeling of shelter, whether that's shelter in a community or in a partnership or in a house or in clothing, out in the weather, is the feeling of my body, and really that includes the heart and the mind, all of my feeling senses, to be more comfortable, right? It's uncomfortable to be freezing cold outside. It's uncomfortable to be, like excluded from a social group. It's uncomfortable to be lonely when you want connection. So all of these are sensual desires. And the flip side of that, of the attraction to the things that will bring comfort, is an aversion or a fear or a pushing away of that which is painful. So I'm frightened by, and again, it's sensual. Hatred is sensual, right? I'm frightened by things that cause me pain. People who say hateful words or would do hurtful things to my body or to the bodies of those I love or care about. You know, I can feel hateful toward, things that aren't intending to cause harm but are doing so anyway. I can get angry at a storm, or an impersonal mass of people, something that you could call like the market. You could be angry at the market for being, causing so much harm, so much pain. Very often we can be angry or hateful at groups of people. I could just say, oh my God, I really have this ill will or like, oh, deep aversion for, this or that government who's doing something, or this or that group of people, or this or that community of people, and so this hindrance or fetter binds us to the world by binding us into contact with the world, into contact with the painful. So in this paradoxical way, both grasping and aversion are forms of grasping. They're forms of having an impulse to continue in contact with something. I either want more contact with some things, or I'm inflamed by contact with something. And even though, like, with the thing that I hate, I want to push it away, I'm not neutral about it. It's actually neutrality, that will get called lots of words in the Buddhist system: dispassion, disenchantment, letting go, equanimity. It's neutrality that actually becomes conducive to really letting go of something. You don't let go of the thing that you hate. You let go of the thing that you don't notice or no longer inflames you. You can just walk away. So the Buddha was very clear and forceful in his recognition that that hatred has a particular force in the heart that leads only to pain. Right? So some of the most famous verses speak about this. So I'll read us a couple here. So from the Dhammapada, this is Gil Fronsdal's translation. This is a set of verses attributed to the Buddha. It's part of the Khuddaka Nikaya, the kind of basket of extra discourses. It's beautiful. It's a very accessible collection of short verses. Many of them are very famous. And so in the first chapter, right near the very beginning, there's a set of verses on hatred, and they go like this. He abused me, attacked me, defeated me, robbed me. For those carrying on like this, hatred does not end. She abused me, attacked me, defeated me, robbed me. For those not carrying on like this, hatred ends. So Gil's flipping the genders, mixing the genders up. I'll often do that as well. So don't get too hung up on those. You can always move the genders around in these texts, understanding that we don't have a language that speaks across the gender spectrum. But that person attacked me, abused me, defeated me, robbed me. For those carrying on like this, hatred does not end. So in this verse, there's not a critique of the truthfulness of the claim of oppression. So, that person has, attacked me, abused me, defeated me, robbed me. The teaching is not saying, let them do that. It doesn't say anything about what you let or don't let happen. And it doesn't say it's not true that they did that, right? It's very much part of the world that folks do attack and abuse and defeat and rob other folks. But the message is about the narrative, the story that we carry in the mind for those carrying on like this, for those continuing. And carrying is a good word. We say carrying on, it's kind of figure of speech. You're going on and on about it. Why are you carrying on about this? But take it literally, for those carrying this burden, right? Carrying this story, hatred does not end. Notice that it's in the past, right? They abused me, they defeated me, they robbed me. So something has happened that's real, that's oppressive, that's hurtful. This isn't a verse about ethics and action. In those verses, there's very much things to be done, right? To protect those who are vulnerable, to respond appropriately with boundaries to harm. But this isn't about that. This is about what we do in the heart and in the mind, which is where the hatred lives. So when we pick up the story of of they did this, and they go and we hold that story. We stir that story in the heart. We make that story our story. Hatred never ends. But for one who takes that story and does not carry it, does not hold on to it, hatred ends. So in some ways, this is a teaching about forgiveness. How do you find forgiveness for one who has caused harm or a group that has caused harm? How do you do that for a person or a group who caused harm in the past but continues to cause harm in the present, or continues to create a space that's unsafe in the present? What do you do with that? And so what we are urged toward here, I think in part, is to separate the emotion of hatred from the skillful action that we should take, could take, can take, want to take in response to harm. So harm clearly happens. There are skillful responses to harm that reduce harm, that contain harm, that, protect the vulnerable, that build a more moral culture so that harm more and more is seen as unacceptable, shameful, not something that you want to vote for or tolerate in your community. Like, it's our work to build those kinds of cultures. In our own hearts, the instruction here is whatever you're doing that's a skillful means in relation to harm, that's one thing. Please do that. But what are you doing in your heart as a skillful response to the stories that are inflaming hatred? So a couple other verses then. Chapter 10 is on violence. So here's the beginning of chapter 10. All tremble at violence, all fear death. Seeing others as being like yourself, do not kill or cause others to kill. All tremble at violence, life is dear for all. Seeing others as being like yourself, do not kill or cause others to kill. Don't speak harshly to anyone. What you say will be said back to you. Hostile speech is painful and you will meet with retaliation. If, like a broken bell, you do not reverberate, then you have attained nibbana and no hostility is found in you. If, like a broken bell, you do not reverberate. So hear that image next to those first two verses, right? They hurt me, abused me, defeated me, robbed me. For the one holding this story, carrying on like this, hatred does not end. But if, like a broken bell, right, you're no longer resounding with that story, the narrative of this was done, um, when the sound of that ancient, really, right, narrative falls silent in you, that's cessation. That's the end of suffering. This is a challenging teaching. This really rubs up against ideas that we may have about what justice means. Does it mean that we are, not responding to hatred in others or violence in others? Are we accepting the violence of the world without doing something about it? I think we can have an urge toward a kind of retribution that we could call justice, or a kind of restoration of goodness, but that may include like punishment or in some way making it so that the folks we think are the the source of harm, are brought down in some way. We may even feel, compassionate, sincerely compassionate, but still be under the influence of views that make it such that these old stories, they did this, this happened, that those stories get stuck in the heart. It's very difficult to not carry on like that. The great, conflicts in the world at the moment, almost all of them, the big wars right now, you will hear in them stories, right? Stories like, like Ukraine was always a part of Russia, so we are restoring what was ours. Like that's a story, they did this, we're going to recover this. It's a story, right? And history is always more complicated than your narrative. History is more complicated than that particular narrative that some folks, in the Russian government want to believe. History, in any time, history is also more complicated than, let's say, a Ukrainian narrative that says this was always Ukraine. The land that was Ukraine has been part of Russia. It's also been part of Poland. Poland and Russia have been part of Ukraine. All of it, the borders have shifted so many times. That's true everywhere, And, of course, maybe the most inflamed case right now, in Gaza. The story, they abused me, they attacked me, they defeated me, us, they robbed us. That story, for almost everyone related to that conflict, you can find that story. They took our land, they attacked our people, they took our people away, they took our land away. There's not, this teaching doesn't come in to propose that we sort of wash out all distinction in a kind of everything falls away in false equivalence. All wrong view is wrong view, therefore, everyone is fettered and everyone is fettered. All wrong view is wrong view, and we can have, a moral distinction about the kinds of harm that we want to stop, the kinds of stories we want to perpetuate. We have to assess all the stories that we're being fed and that we are feeding back out into the world and look at them for this underbelly of hatred. And we can still act skillfully, to protect those being harmed. But hatred, hatred is such a strong word that sometimes it can feel, I think, for some of us distant or like that's the very inflamed end of something that I'm not sure I have. I could be like, I don't hate anyone. Like that's intense. I'm afraid of some people. I'm critical of some people. I think vyāpāda, that we translate as ill will or hatred, it appears on a long spectrum, just as grasping does. And the far end of that spectrum includes the violent hatred, the wanting to kill, wanting to destroy something. But if the impulse in hatred is all along the spectrum, is this force that fills the body, that contacts something in the world, judges it to be undesirable in some way, dangerous or painful or uncomfortable or ugly or unjust. And then and then assembles, or takes in from the cultural atmosphere a narrative that affirms that energy, right? That then even in a mild way, it's on the hatred spectrum. I work really hard not to cultivate hatred for folks in our government right now who are doing things that I really think are harmful. And that's a bit of work sometimes. I think it's good work to do. I encourage it. But I can notice that I don't want to hide behind or be deluded about or do any kind of spiritual bypass around the feelings that are actually there. And our practice is not just to come up with the feelings we should have, like I should be compassionate and equanimous and generous of spirit, but it's to be real with the feelings that are truly there. And I can hear about what's happening in our country or the larger world, and I can feel a number of things at the same time, right? I can feel a kind of grief that this is where we've landed. I can feel an authentic compassion. See some of these folks on the television or the computer screen giving their speeches, doing their things, and sometimes all I can see is trauma. It's just wounds being spoken from. And other times all of that is present, and there's a kind of revulsion, a kind of just like ugh. And when I am honest with myself about that, and I feel that, and I could feel the way that that is on the spectrum of wishing them ill, even if I don't consciously wish them ill. But it's not just critique, and it's not just, compassionate discernment of unwholesomeness, but it's really like, when you're just like, oh man, I just really don't like that guy, whoever it is. You can feel that feeling, and this way that there's non-freedom there for me. Just get selfish. It's not about what they're doing. Yeah, they're evil. That's their karma. For you, you're having a feeling, and that feeling has a charge to it. And that charge, you can feel it in your body, in your heart. And it's different than, maybe a neutral feeling. Like, let's say you hear news of, a dictator, kind of strongman somewhere else in the world, somewhere you have no connection to. I saw a documentary at one point about a dictator in like one of the stands, Turkmenistan maybe, I don't know. He's really into these like very particular fine horses. He's got statues of horses in his presidential office, and and I remember the feeling of like wow, what a scene over there. I had no idea. Okay, I've learned a little bit, but I'm not that emotionally invested. I mean, I care about the people. I want them to be well, but I don't hate this guy, this horse-loving dictator. And then I come back home and I watch the news about our own, much closer to home dictators, and there's much more like, ah. And so practicing with hatred is not about just looking out for when it's really inflamed and like intense out on the end spectrum. It's looking for that clench in the heart where I'm encountering something in the world and I'm not able to set it down. I'm not able to just let it go. Or I'm not able to say, wow, something should be done about that, and I'm gonna, get together with my indivisible chapter, or I'm gonna write a letter, or I'm gonna vote, or I'm gonna do things. I'm gonna call up, MAGA Uncle Danny and give him a talking to, like whatever. It's not just that, but that there's a kind of clench in the heart. And that clench in the heart keeps us bound here. keeps us bound to the cycle of suffering, you know. And I give a lot of political examples because that's the thing that most inflames me. It could be something else entirely for you, you know. Maybe it's an ex-partner who treated you badly, you know, in an intimate relationship, or it's a family member who was harmful or abusive, you know. And those are deep to unwind, you know. If you think about someone that should be safe or could have been safe but wasn't, or was intimate and has become dangerous, and it's not just your heart isn't clear yet. You can feel how there's a kind of like, I don't wish them well as much as I want to, or maybe I even consciously do, but there's still a rub in there. And so that's where we find that fetter of ill will. So I think to practice with this, in the same way really as the practice with sensual desire, right? There's a first layer that's just, first you have to just find it. Like, it's subtle. It's not always obvious. You find it, you know, partly by starting with dukkha, starting with unsatisfyingness, right? You're moving through your world, and you know, if you're not profoundly at peace and ease, then you can find it, one of these two. What's going on that you're not happy and at ease? You know, resting in the ease of the Buddhas. And, you know, and it's just going to be something, right? I wish my thumb didn't hurt. I wish, you know, I wish we hadn't run out of toast. You know, like, you can complain about a lot of things. I'm mad about big things, small things. Somebody said something to me, I didn't like it. I said something to somebody and I didn't like it. So we identify, you find, this is really, in a certain way, this is basic somatic self, you know, counseling in a way, inquiry, somatic inquiry. But you find the thing that hurts. When it hurts, don't let it wash out into the narrative of hurt. You know, things are all just effed right now and my life is nuts and what do I, like, I don't know what to do, right? That's a big story. See if you can stop, pause, stand in the middle of the room and say, what actually hurts right now? And maybe, and you know, and maybe it's just, you know, oh, I know a bunch of things I have to do. It's hard to do them. I'm struggling in my mind to just do the things that I have to do that are on my list. Or I have to have a difficult conversation with someone. But you have to identify it. You have to actually come out of the wash of things are unpleasant into the specific of, what is my heart doing that hurts right now? Right? And it's going to be one of the great three, right? I'm going to be grasping, I'm going to be pushing away, or I'm going to be spacing out, or some mixture. And so with these two fetters, it's like, what am I wanting? What am I lusting toward? It's like, oh, I want to feel less pressured by whatever, my job, my work, my people. You know, that's a wanting. I can feel, can I feel that want? You know, or I notice the pain, like, what is it? What is it? Oh, it's this pressure from somebody, or this thing that I have to do, or this thing that's happening. I don't like it. I wish it would go away. If you can contact the aversion and you're like, what do I hate about this? It's like, oh, I hate being, you know, whatever it is, whatever you've got. Okay, there's the aversion, there's the hatred, you know. And so step one is to actually find it in the specific. And then when I find it, you know, mostly it's just mindfulness, like, I need to see it. If I'm thinking of it in terms of the fetter, remember that it builds on having already seen through the fixated self. So you could ask a question like, in what way does this aversion, this hatred, this ill will, or this grasping desire, in what way is this interwoven with my idea of who I am? You know, I'm a failure, or I can't ever do it, or I'm super good at this thing, so I shouldn't be having a hard time, or like what part of your identity is being wrapped up in this thing? Can we see through that? Can you see through the personality view? Say, oh, the thing that's painful here is a story about what's happening. And then there's a specific sensual contact that's painful. So differentiate those two, pull them apart. All of this is just an inquiry that comes down to what's happening. What's happening on the emotional level, on the energetic level, on the story level in my body. And once I know what's happening, mindfulness and clear comprehension, sati sampajana, can see it clearly. Say, oh, right, I'm, you know, I'm stressed because of this project and I'm scared of failing. Okay. And see if you can bring it down to a word. It's like, oh, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. That's what this is. I'm afraid. Oh, can I feel that? Can I just stand here in the middle of the room and be afraid? And very often with hatred, you'll find fear underneath it. I'm so mad at what's happening in this country. Okay, but what's really here? And I drop down and like, oh, I'm afraid. I'm afraid for what will happen to me, to my family, to my kid, to my friends, to people I know who are hiding from ICE right now. I'm afraid, okay, and I'm angry at the people doing this. How do you feel that? Where do you feel it? Where does that live in you? How does that tie into the story of myself? And can I see it as not based in story, or can I set aside the story in a way, or tease apart the story so that I can sense in the present that there's a sensation that's happening, And the sensation could be something like, when I tell this story, I'm afraid of what will happen to my friends. I feel this clenching in the body. I come back again and again to the body. Or you notice the story and you just say, ouch. I hear that story. What will happen to my friends, my kid, my country, my world, the seals, the salmon. Ouch. And I think the uprooting of these two deep fetters is when, instead of being these unconscious impulses to grasp at the world or push it away, they become symptoms of dukkha. They both come from this core ouch. I'm in contact with the world, I'm intimate with the world, and it just hurts. Right? As Warsan Shire's poem says, I trace my fingers over the atlas. Where does it hurt? Everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. The dukkha, the ouch, when it can be seen and held directly with intimacy, doesn't need to then, solidify into grasping at this, hating this. You can feel the ouch directly. So these two fetters are the symptoms of dukkha. And so when we see them for what they are, we extricate them from the story that they live in, and we contact the dukkha that they ride on, or that is the motor behind them. And being directly with dukkha, is then our practice. Right? The first noble truth, dukkha, is to be understood. Pain is to be understood. So before you can uproot it, before you can just let go, it has to be understood. I have to know hatred in the heart and know grasping in the heart. And when it's fully understood, seen with clarity, seen free from the narrative that props it up, it's easier to uproot. It falls away eventually, right? Because you can feel how it's actually not, it's neither helpful nor it doesn't succeed. It doesn't succeed in relieving dukkha for those who carry on like this. hatred never ends. So.